It's not very often that a game grabs me as tightly as the Banner Saga did, and since the second chapter just released recently, I thought I'd take a dive into the series to see why it's so good. Before I begin, I'd like to take a minute to talk about world building. With many games and stories, the problem that usually arises is that the world only really exists within the plot of that particular piece of media. Say if you look at a game like Borderlands, we can see how the only thing explained about the world is how it's relevant to the plot. The planet is dangerous and it has vaults. The game doesn't really expand beyond this. It doesn't really talk about other planets besides Pandora, what the company's true motivations are, the people behind it. You can see that characters in that universe only really exist to further the plot, and not to provide insight into the world. Now don't get me wrong, this is not a bad thing. I'm willing to bet most people don't enjoy Borderlands for its world building, but it is why many people absolutely love franchises like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. When you dive into a story in one of these two worlds, there are characters and references to events that take place outside the scope of the story, and characters that can relate to those outside events. The size of the world presented to you is much larger than the size of the plot that you are moving through, and this makes the world feel so much more alive. What is happening in this world is only a small slice of what this world has to offer. And this is something that I believe the Banner Saga does very well. At its core, the Banner Saga is about getting a group of people from position A to position B without too many of them dying. And along the way you get to discover and put the pieces together of a world that is full of lore and past. Simply opening the map shows you how large this world is, with little snippets of background for each location. And while I won't spoil where you end up going, I will say that you really don't explore that much of this map. This leaves so much more to be desired and imagined, and it feels like this world is just ripe with so many stories and adventures to be discovered, and you as the player is drip-fed bits of the past and information, you just want more and more. It's so very satisfying to exist and learn more about this world. The story starts out rather simple. The sun in the sky no longer sets, and a mysterious race of stone people called the Dredge are invading from the north, and you have to run away from them. Along the way, you pass by godstones built to honor gods, who are assumed to be dead now. You meet people who have faced Dredge in the past. You meet the Menders, who know of what's happening to the world, but are unable or unwilling to tell you. You visit towns that have been standing hundreds of years with their own history and background, and you can just tell that there's so much thought put into this world. It's really quite impressive for one game. But of course this is all complemented by the actual gameplay supporting it, which is separated into two main parts. The caravan sections and the tactical battles. As I said before, the core concept of this game is getting people from point A to point B with as little of them dying as possible, and the caravan portion is where this comes into play. As you travel across this world, you're faced with decisions regarding the well-being of your caravan. Will you take in stragglers? Will you pursue a rumor of supplies? Depending on what you choose, you may gain or lose supplies, morale, or lives. Now I really enjoy this mechanic because it sort of circumvents the problem a lot of choice-based games have, in that they start and end very narrow, with only the mid-sections being affected by the choices you make. But in this, the goal is the same regardless of what your choices are. Get these people from point A to point B. So your choices only affect the lives of the people in your caravan, and most choices are only contained in small, isolated events. In my own experience, it made me care about these people in my caravan more, and I would change my perspective on the situations as events either succeeded or ended up being a loss. If those refugees I met on the road ended up stealing my supplies, I would be more cautious in accepting people in later situations. If I allow my caravan to stop for a day to celebrate a holiday, and it raises my morale, I'm more likely to be lenient in similar situations later on. It really makes you stop and think about your decisions, and what would be best for your caravan and their lives. However, this does mean that there are not very many large game-changing choices, and even then, those don't end up making all that much of a difference in the long run. I'll only talk briefly about the tactical battles because I think it is the weaker portion of the game. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. In actuality, I think it's quite fun. But the battles rarely have any effect on the rest of the game, and the lack of variety in terrain and the fact that there aren't very many special moves between characters make it rather simple. This does make the game easier to complete, as battles are never too difficult on normal, and the lack of permadeath doesn't make it too stressful. The Banner Saga is a fantastic experience. The game is just ripe with interesting lore. The developers have not only created a world that I want to explore and learn more about, but have also created a compelling storyline within that game. This truly is a world that stands out and gives you interesting choices that change your approach to future events, and that is why I think the Banner Saga is so great. Thank you for watching.